Welcome to Village Connect. I'm Tom R., pastor of Village Church. This is What I Love About This Gospel, a read through the Gospel of Mark. In this session, we're going to read a couple of passages from the 6th chapter of Mark. I want you to read the opening verses 1 through 6, and then skip to verses 30 through 44. So chapter 6, verses 1 through 6, and then 30 through 44. Read those and see what strikes you, and when you've finished that, come back to the video, we'll begin the conversation. I love this view of downtown, this view of where we live. You know, a hometown is more than just a place. It's more than just a zip code. It's a way of being. It's a way of living. Mark tells us that Jesus went to his hometown. They knew him there. They knew how things were there, and he knew them as well. Didn't go so well. We'll get to that in a minute. I remember being invited to go back to the church community in which I grew up. It was great fun. My friend Bob there, he had been a real leader in that church and an important person to me when I was a youngster. He said to me, Tom, if you ever get tired of that church out there in the Midwest, you just come on home. That's what he said. He knew, and I knew as well. I'd never go back there. It's not really home anymore. This is home. You know, Jesus went to his hometown, and they knew him. That's what they said. Oh, this is Mary's boy. We know him. We know his brothers. We know his sisters. And he taught them, and it says he offended them. The Greek word is scandalizo, it scandalized them. It literally means he tripped them up. And Mark doesn't tell us exactly what he says. It's kind of interesting. You'd think if Jesus offended them that Mark would tell us what he said. But maybe Mark assumes that we know him well enough to imagine what he said. Maybe he told them to love their neighbor and to love their enemy. Maybe he told them to go the second mile. Maybe he told them to care about the poor and the imprisoned and the outcast. We can imagine what it is he said. He tripped them up. You know, we say sometimes you can't go home anymore. Maybe that's what tripped them up. He didn't quite fit in anymore. Maybe they thought he had moved on. He's not from among us. He's not at home here anymore. Maybe. But you know what makes more sense to me? What makes more sense to me is that they were offended by him because what he taught them revealed that they weren't at home anymore. You know, a hometown it's more than just a zip code. It is a way of life. And maybe the struggle with Jesus is not that he is so good and so righteous and so faithful and so much God's Spirit right in front of us. But maybe what's so offensive is that not only is he that way, but he consistently believes we can be more like that. We're not righteous, but we can be more righteous. We're not always good, but we can be more faithful. Maybe that's what tripped them up, that they realized that the way of life that they had imagined for themselves and had constructed for themselves, it wasn't home anymore. It's beautiful. It's beautiful from up here. And there's a lot of beauty in it down there. But there's also need. And when there's need, when there's hurt, when systems are broken and people are passed by, We're not at home anymore. Maybe that's why he keeps tripping us up. It's time for us to move closer to home. So as we continue in the 6th chapter, Mark tells the story of Jesus as he feeds the 5,000. It's the only miracle story that all 4 gospel writers tell. And the way Mark tells it is the disciples are fatigued, they're anxious. We just read the story of the beheading of John the Baptist. They're needing some retreat time. But the crowds show up with all their conference brochures filled out. They're ready for Jesus to teach them. And at the end of the long day of teaching, the disciples say, send them away. They need to go into the towns and the villages where they can buy food, where they can be nourished. Send them away. But Jesus looks at his disciples and says, you feed them. Well, they scrounged around what they had, and what they had was nothing more than would work for a picnic. Not even enough for them. 5 loaves, 2 fish, it says. Certainly can't feed 5,000 with that. It's always like that with the church, isn't it? The needs around us are always greater than our capacity to address them. It leaves us feeling often fatigued, weary, overwhelmed, inadequate. But Jesus insists, you feed them. They give to him what they collected, 5 loaves, 2 fish. He blessed it, he broke it, he gave it to them, and they began to feed. And it says everybody was satisfied. And then here's the thing. When it was over, they collected the leftovers. 12 baskets. 12 baskets of leftovers. The story starts with 12 disciples feeling inadequate, overwhelmed, weary, discouraged, and it ends with a basket for each disciple, abundance. And what happens in between is they engage in the ministry of Jesus Christ. See, if I understand it, it is engaging in that ministry, in that act of service, that our souls are fed, that our lives are enriched, that we know the blessing that God intends for all of us. There's no mystery here. He says, you feed them. They do, and they're basketful left over.